So one of the fundamental mysteries of this show is the question you just asked me. Our two heroes at the center of the show, Ben and Michaela, brother and sister, will represent, among other things, the voices of the debate about the mystery of the plane. Was this a scientific phenomenon? Is it a supernatural phenomenon? Is it faith-based? Ben, Josh Dallas's character, I think of him as sort of the Richard Dreyfuss character from Close Encounters. Scientific mind, tenacious, convinced that there's an earthbound explanation to everything that has happened. His sister, Michaela, played by Melissa Roxburgh, is a lapsed person of faith. Her mother was very religious. Her mother has tragically passed away. We come to discover early in the episode she died during the interim that Michaela and Ben were on the airplane, and the faith that she lost, Michaela, because of some terrible events that had happened to her in her past, start to come back into fruition again as she experiences the miracle of returning. So by the end of episode 1, we've kind of teed up the question of, is it science or is it faith and supernatural? And I'm not going to answer that question directly because over the course of the episodes and the seasons, we will inch along our mythology as sort of a puzzle in a way that Ben thinks that he's getting closer to his answer, Michaela thinks she's getting closer to her answer, and the ultimate series mystery will be the answer to the question that you've asked. So we're gonna tease that along, and we'll come to discover that one of them is much more right than the other.
Do you have a plan of how long you want this mystery to play out?
So when I pitched the series to the studios and networks last year, I presented a 6-year plan. My mythology that I had created has chapters to it, if you will, and it lends itself to 6 seasons. So hopefully we have the opportunity to go the distance. When you pitch an event mystery like this in 2018, the network executives really want to know that you know where you're going. They want to know that you have a roadmap. So when I went in to pitch the show, I laid out that roadmap. Not everything, but I talked them through where we'll be at the end of season 1. I talked to them about where we'll be at the end of series, and I gave them some other broad strokes along the way. The show, in my mind, works in chapters. By the time we get halfway through season 1, there'll be a major mythology pivot. By the time we get to the end of season 1, there'll be another pivot, and we'll kind of blow open our mythology somewhat at those 2 pivot points, and that'll give us the trajectory as we drive into subsequent seasons. So yes, there's a plan, and I'm excited to take people on that journey.
So where would you like to think each story will go? Is it something where all these passengers' lives are intertwined, or does each have a specific journey they're going to go on as a quest?
So one of the cool things that excites me about the show is that it falls kind of into 3 storytelling buckets. First and foremost, in my mind, we're a relationship drama. We're telling the story of this one extended family, these adult siblings. Each of them are in a relationship, and each, because of the complication of their disappearance and return, finds itself in a relationship triangle. There's infidelity without moral culpability, because the passage of time forced people to move on in ways that they couldn't help and in ways that feel incredibly justified. So those relationship dramas will play out in a very grounded fashion over the course of the season and seasons beyond. That's one component. The second component of the show is that of the event mystery. It involves not only our extended family, but many other passengers from the plane. We glimpse into the lives of a handful of other passengers in the pilot episode. We meet about 5 or 6 other passengers and crew. They are significant in the series, and in the early episodes, we'll get to know them and their lives just as we've gotten to know our core family members. Over the course of the series, there are 191 passengers and crew on that airplane. Each one of those people has a story to share, and it's my goal to get to as many of them as possible. To answer your question, many of their lives will intersect, intertwine in surprising ways that touches both on the investigative aspect of the show and also on the spiritual side of the show. I referred to 3 buckets. One of them is that event mystery. One of them is the relationship drama. The third is that there's sort of a procedural component to the show. Each week there'll be a closed-ended mission, if you will, that wraps up each week, even while the other aspects of the show are serialized. And those mission-oriented procedural stories also will draw on any number of passengers from the plane, and we'll find that each and every one of them takes on an unexpected, pivotal role as we go from mission to mission, episode to episode.
Is there a specific relationship or thread that you were most excited to unpack?
That's a tough one. That's asking me to choose between my babies. You know, it's hard to say. You know, on the one hand, the 2 relationship triangles are equally juicy and problematic. That involve, you know, new romances, new lovers, and a person who hadn't been left, a person who had been left behind, having to choose between a past relationship and a present relationship. But another interesting, juicy relationship, not a romantic one, is one between Ben and his daughter Olive. Ben comes into series with twin 10-year-olds. One ends up on the plane with him, one doesn't. When he comes back, one of the twins has grown a lot older. Can you imagine the shock to the system that any father would have to get on an airplane, saying goodbye to a 10-year-old daughter, and returning to a 16-year-old? That one is particularly interesting. I think particularly unique, and it presents a really interesting challenge for Ben's character and for Olive, his daughter. And that's a relationship that we explore in great detail in the very early episodes. And there's some very emotional storytelling right there that I'm very excited about.
How much of the overarching plot can you actually share with the main character actors?
You know, I talk with the actors in broad strokes about where they're going emotionally. They came to me very early on and said, we don't necessarily want to know everywhere we're going. Well, you know, they made the point that I think is an interesting one, that as an actor, it can be helpful to their process not to know where they're going, so that they're discovering it in real time, especially because that search, that exploration for the answers is so fundamental to, you know, Ben and Michaela's journey in this series, that, you know, not knowing, I think, will help their performance, or so they said to me, and that, you know, that's fine with me, because I think it'll be exciting for them to discover the mystery week to week. I suppose I've spoiled for them somewhat emotionally what they can expect ahead, without necessarily offering tangible details, but it's an ongoing conversation. You know, we're on set every day together, and things slip out. But I'm trying to hold on to it as much as possible, and as long as they don't, you know, make me walk over the coals, I'll keep it to myself.
There's been a lot said that this show could be like another version of Lost, but I don't know if it is or not, because I'm not sure if it's going to be flashback based. It seems like a lot of the interactions all in the current time. Is there going to be that kind of tie-in with the past flashbacks?
First of all, what an honor to be compared to a show like Lost. I should be so lucky. We all should be so lucky to have the longevity that show had, and to generate the excitement that show had. And it very much has, you know, inspired the mystery that I'm trying to dole out in this show. There are similarities, and in fact, you refer to the flashback component. Flashbacks are, in fact, a component of our show. You don't experience it in the pilot episode. I had so much story to tell, so much to unpack in real time that I didn't have an opportunity to jump into I didn't have an opportunity to jump into backstory. But in episode 2 and onward, the audience will discover that there is a flashback component, and we will frequently be jumping back in time to peel the onion, looking backwards, even as we go forwards. And so that is a fair comparison. And now that we are on the network of This Is Us, we're trying to kind of tell the kinds of stories that the This Is Us audience would find appealing. So that's a new inspiration for us, I suppose.